The whistle screamed, and the crowd roared like a living beast. But for Ethan Caldwell, the world was silent. His heart pounded as he stood on the sidelines, the weight of his teammates' glares heavier than the pads on his shoulders. At 17, he was the star quarterback of Lincoln High's football team, until last week, when he'd been outed and his world shattered. It started with a whisper, a cruel rumor sparked by a stolen glance at practice. Ethan had always been careful, hiding his feelings for his best friend, Ryan, behind playful punches and quick smiles. But in a small Ohio town where football was religion and tradition was law, one slip, a lingering look caught by the wrong eyes, was enough to unravel everything. By Monday, the locker room buzzed with slurs, his teammates' loyalty replaced by cold shoulders and venomous words. "We don't want a fag leading us." Jake, the team's linebacker, had spat, his voice echoed by others. Coach Thompson, a man Ethan once saw as a father, didn't intervene. Instead, he benched Ethan for the season's biggest game, citing team unity. Now, as the state championship loomed, Ethan watched from the sidelines, his jersey stripped away, replaced by a hoodie that felt like a shroud. The scoreboard glowed. Lincoln High trailed by 3, with 30 seconds left. Ryan, the wide receiver and Ethan's secret love, caught his eye from the field. Those blue eyes, usually so steady, flickered with something desperate, something that said, "We need you." Ethan's chest tightened. He'd spent years proving himself, throwing perfect spirals, leading Lincoln to victory after victory. But being gay, that was the sin his town couldn't forgive. Yet, as the clock ticked down, Ethan felt a spark ignite. He wasn't done fighting. Not for his team, not for himself, not for Ryan. The game was slipping away. Lincoln's backup quarterback, a nervous sophomore named Tyler, fumbled the snap, and the ball skittered across the turf. The crowd groaned, and Ethan's hands clenched. He could feel the play in his bones, the angle of the throw, the arc to Ryan streaking downfield. He'd run that route 1,000 times in practice, Ryan's laughter echoing as they collapsed in the grass, their shoulders brushing just a little too long. "Get in there, Caldwell," a voice shouted. Ethan turned, stunned, to see Coach Thompson waving him onto the field. The man's face was unreadable, but his eyes held a flicker of regret. Ethan didn't hesitate. He ripped off his hoodie, grabbed his helmet, and sprinted onto the turf, the crowd's murmurs swelling into a confused roar. The huddle was a minefield. Jake's jaw tightened, and others avoided Ethan's gaze, but Ryan's voice cut through. "You've got this, E. We trust you." His hand brushed Ethan's arm, a fleeting touch that steadied Ethan's racing heart. He called the play a risky deep pass to Ryan. It was their signature move, one they'd perfected under midnight stars when no one was watching. The ball snapped and time slowed. Ethan dropped back, scanning the field. Defenders swarmed, but Ryan was a blur, cutting through the secondary. Ethan's arm whipped forward, the ball sailing in a perfect arc. It was a prayer, a defiance, a declaration. The stadium held its breath as Ryan leaped, arms outstretched, and the ball landed in his hands. Touchdown. The crowd erupted, but Ethan only saw Ryan, grinning as he spiked the ball and ran to him. They collided in a hug, the world fading until it was just them, two boys against a town that tried to break them. That night, under the stadium lights, Ethan and Ryan slipped away to the bleachers. The air was crisp, the stars sharp above the Ohio skyline. "I thought I'd lost you," Ryan whispered, his voice raw. Ethan took his hand, no longer afraid of who might see. "You're my home," he said, and for the first time he believed it. But the victory was only the beginning. The town's judgment lingered, and Ethan knew the road ahead would be brutal. His teammates' acceptance was fragile, and Coach's change of heart felt like a bandage on a deeper wound. Yet, as Ryan's fingers laced with his, Ethan felt a quiet strength. He'd won more than a game, he'd reclaimed his truth. The next morning, Ethan woke to a flood of texts. Some were hateful, others curious, a few proud. One stood out, Jake's. I was wrong. You're still our QB. Ethan stared at the words, his throat tight. Change was slow, but it was coming. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every kid like him, invisible in small towns across America. Ethan's days became a balancing act. School was a gauntlet of whispers and stares, but he held his head high, Ryan at his side. They ate lunch in the courtyard, their knees brushing under the table, a silent rebellion against the eyes that judged them. Ethan's parents, devout and traditional, struggled to understand. His mom cried when he told her, but his dad's silence cut deeper. Still, Ethan refused to hide. He wore his Letterman jacket with pride, a symbol of who he was: quarterback, gay, unapologetic. Practice was tense. Some teammates warmed to him, inspired by his courage on the field, but others, led by Jake's wavering loyalty, kept their distance. Ethan threw himself into training, determined to prove his worth not just as a player but as a leader. Ryan was his anchor, stealing moments in the locker room or under the bleachers, their kisses quick and defiant. One evening, as they walked home through the town's quiet streets, Ryan stopped under a street lamp. "What if we leave?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Go somewhere we don't have to fight every day?" Ethan pulled him close, their foreheads touching. "We stay," he said. "We show them we belong." The season rolled on, each game a battle. Ethan's arm was a cannon, his leadership undeniable, but off the field, the town's prejudice festered. A local pastor preached against him, and flyers appeared in mailboxes, calling him a disgrace. Ethan's resolve wavered, but Ryan's faith in him didn't. "You're changing things?" Ryan said one night, lying on Ethan's bed, their hands entwined. "You're making it easier for the next kid." Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed. Was he strong enough? Could he carry this weight? The answer came in the next game, a brutal away match against their rivals. The crowd jeered, slurs cutting through the noise, but Ethan focused on Ryan's voice in the huddle. "We've got this," Ryan said, and Ethan nodded, his heart steady. The game was a war, tied until the final seconds. Ethan called a trick play, faking a handoff and launching a pass to Ryan. The ball soared, and Ryan caught it at the 1-yard line, diving into the end zone as time expired. The Lincoln fans went wild, drowning out the hate. Ethan ran to Ryan, lifting him off the ground, their laughter a shield against the world. The victory didn't erase the scars. Ethan's name was a lightning rod, splitting Lincoln into those who cheered his courage and those who saw him as a stain on their town's pride. The local paper ran a story: "Teen quarterback defies odds, but at what cost?" Ethan read it at the diner, his coffee growing cold. The words stung, but Ryan's hand on his under the table kept him grounded. School became a battlefield. A group of seniors, egged on by Jake's older brother, cornered Ethan in the hallway, their words sharp as knives. "You're ruining the team," one sneered. Ethan's fists clenched, but he walked away, Ryan's warning echoing in his mind. "Don't let them win by breaking you." Still, the weight of their hate pressed harder each day. At home, things were no easier. Ethan's dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I just want you to be normal, son." Ethan's heart cracked, but he stood tall. "This is me, Dad. I'm not changing." His mom, torn between love and fear, left pamphlets about healing on his desk. Ethan tossed them in the trash, but the hurt lingered. Football was his refuge. On the field, Ethan was untouchable, his passes slicing through defenses, his leadership pulling the team together. Jake, once his biggest critic, started to soften, clapping Ethan's shoulder after a perfect play. "You're still a beast, Caldwell," he muttered, almost reluctant. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Ryan, though, was Ethan's true north. They'd steal moments in Ryan's car, parked by the river, where the world couldn't touch them. One night, under a blanket of stars, Ryan traced Ethan's jaw with his thumb. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. Ethan kissed him, slow and sure, the river's murmur their only witness. In those moments, Ethan felt invincible. But invincibility was an illusion. The next game was a crucible. Their opponents, a team from a neighboring town, had heard the rumors. Their defense targeted Ethan, hitting him harder than necessary, their taunts laced with slurs. Ethan gritted his teeth, his focus razor-sharp. He threw a touchdown to Ryan, silencing the crowd, but the hits kept coming. By the fourth quarter, his ribs ached, and blood trickled from a cut on his lip. Coach Thompson pulled him aside. "You're taking a beating out there. I can bench you." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not quitting." Coach's eyes softened, a rare glimpse of the man Ethan once trusted. "You're tougher than I gave you credit for," he said, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope. The game ended in a narrow win, but the real fight was off the field. A group of opposing fans waited by the bus, shouting slurs as Ethan boarded. Ryan stepped in front of him, his voice steady. "Back off." The fans laughed but dispersed, and Ethan squeezed Ryan's hand, grateful for his courage. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The bruises on his body were nothing compared to the ones on his heart. He wondered if fighting was worth it, if he and Ryan could ever find peace in a town that hated them. But then he thought of Ryan's smile, the way his eyes lit up after a catch, and Ethan knew he'd keep going. The season's final games loomed, and Lincoln was on track for the state championship. Ethan's performance was undeniable, his stats shattering school records. The team rallied around him, even Jake, who started calling plays with a grudging respect. But the town's division grew sharper. A petition circulated to remove Ethan as quarterback, claiming he was a distraction. It gained traction, fueled by the pastor's sermons and anonymous online posts. Ethan and Ryan fought back in their own way. They started a GSA at school, a small act of defiance that drew a handful of allies, kids who'd been hiding their own truths. One girl, Sarah, shared her story of being shunned by her family. Ethan listened, his heart heavy but resolute. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. At practice, Ethan pushed harder, his throws sharper, his leadership fiercer. He and Ryan ran drills until their lungs burned, their connection on the field a mirror of their bond off it. One evening, as they cooled down on the grass, Ryan turned to him. "You ever think about what happens after high school?" Ethan nodded, his voice soft. "Yeah, you and me, somewhere we can just be us." The dream felt distant, but it fueled Ethan. He started researching colleges with strong football programs and inclusive campuses. He wanted a future where he and Ryan could walk hand in hand without fear. But first, they had to survive the championship and the town that wanted to tear them apart. The semifinal game was a brutal test. The opposing team played dirty, targeting Ethan with late hits and whispered slurs. He took every blow, his eyes locked on Ryan, who ran routes like a man possessed. With seconds left, Ethan called a play they'd never tried in a game, a flea flicker that relied on perfect timing. He handed off to the running back, who tossed it back. Ethan launched the ball, a missile to Ryan, who caught it in stride and sprinted to the end zone. The crowd exploded, and Ethan ran to Ryan, their helmets clashing in a triumphant embrace. For a moment, the world was perfect. But as they left the field, a bottle sailed from the stands, narrowly missing Ethan's head. The crowd's cheers turned to boos, and Ethan's heart sank. Victory on the field wasn't enough, not yet. That night, Ethan and Ryan sat on the hood of Ryan's car, the town's lights flickering below. "We're close," Ryan said, his voice fierce. "One more game, and we show them who we are." Ethan nodded, his hand finding Ryan's. The championship was their chance, not just to win, but to prove they couldn't be broken. The championship week was a pressure cooker. Lincoln buzzed with anticipation, but the air was thick with tension. Ethan's face was plastered on local news, not as a hero but as a controversy. "Gay quarterback divides town," one headline screamed. Ethan tried to ignore it, focusing on drills and Ryan's steady presence, but the weight was crushing. His parents' house felt like a war zone. His dad's silence had turned to arguments, his voice rising with every mention of Ethan's choice. His mom, desperate to keep peace, begged Ethan to tone it down until after the game. "I'm not hiding," Ethan snapped, his voice breaking. He stormed out, finding refuge at Ryan's house, where Ryan's mom, a quiet ally, welcomed him with a hug and a plate of cookies. At school, the GSA grew, a small beacon of hope. Sarah and a few others organized a rally for Ethan before the championship, holding signs that read "Lincoln loves Ethan" and "Pride in our QB." It drew a crowd, some supportive, others hostile. Ethan stood with Ryan, their hands clasped, facing the jeers with defiance. "We're not going anywhere," Ethan told the crowd, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. Practice was grueling. Coach Thompson pushed the team to their limits, his faith in Ethan restored but tempered by caution. "You're our shot, Caldwell," he said, his tone gruff but sincere. Jake, now a reluctant ally, nodded in agreement. The team was fractured, but Ethan's arm and Ryan's speed were their best hope. They ran plays until midnight, Ethan's voice hoarse from calling signals, Ryan's catches flawless under the stadium lights. The night before the championship, Ethan and Ryan slipped away to their spot by the river. The water reflected the stars, and Ethan felt a rare calm. "What if we lose?" he asked, his voice small. Ryan turned to him, his eyes fierce. "We won't. And even if we do, we've already won. We're here together." Ethan kissed him, the world shrinking to the warmth of Ryan's lips, the strength of his arms. But doubt lingered. Ethan lay awake that night, replaying every play, every slur, every moment he'd been told he didn't belong. He thought of the kids at the GSA, of Sarah's tearful story, of Ryan's unwavering belief. He wasn't just playing for himself, he was playing for them, for every kid who'd ever felt invisible. The morning of the championship dawned cold and clear. The town was a sea of Lincoln blue, but Ethan felt the undercurrent of judgment. At the stadium, he suited up in silence, the locker room a mix of camaraderie and tension. Jake clapped his shoulder, a silent truce, but others kept their distance. Ryan caught Ethan's eye, flashing a grin that said, "We've got this." The game was a war. The opposing team, the Hawks, were relentless, their defense a wall of muscle and speed. Ethan took hit after hit, his body screaming, but he kept throwing, each pass a defiance of the pain. Ryan was electric, dodging tacklers, catching impossible throws. By halftime, Lincoln trailed by 10, and the crowd's cheers were laced with doubt. In the locker room, Coach Thompson rallied them. "This is your moment," he said, his eyes on Ethan. "Show them what you're made of." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. He glanced at Ryan, who mouthed, "I love you." It was a spark, igniting Ethan's fire. The third quarter was a grind. Ethan connected with Ryan for a touchdown, narrowing the gap, but the Hawks answered with a field goal. Ethan called a play, a deep pass to Ryan. The snap was clean, but the pocket collapsed. Ethan scrambled, dodging a sack, his eyes locked on Ryan sprinting downfield. He threw the ball a desperate arc, and Ryan leaped, snatching it from the air. He landed hard, tackled at the 10-yard line as the clock ticked down to 30 seconds. The huddle was chaos. Jake shouted for a run, but Ethan shook his head. "We go big," he said, his voice steady. He called their signature play, the one they'd run under the stars, the one that defined them. Ryan nodded, his eyes blazing with trust. The ball snapped and Ethan dropped back. The Hawks' defense blitzed, a tidal wave of bodies. Ethan sidestepped, his body screaming, and launched the ball. It soared, a perfect spiral, as Ryan streaked into the end zone. The crowd held its breath, time frozen, as Ryan's hands closed around the ball. Touchdown. The stadium erupted, a wall of sound that shook the earth. Ethan sprinted to Ryan, their bodies colliding in a hug that felt like a promise kept. The scoreboard flashed. Lincoln wins. The crowd chanted Ethan's name, and for the first time, he felt their love outweigh their hate. As the team hoisted the trophy, Ethan and Ryan stood side by side, their hands brushing in the chaos. Coach Thompson pulled Ethan aside, his voice low. "I was wrong about you, son. You're a leader." Ethan nodded, tears stinging his eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was enough. That night, the town celebrated, and Ethan and Ryan slipped away to the bleachers. The stars were bright, the air alive with possibility. "We did it," Ryan whispered, his hand in Ethan's. Ethan smiled, his heart full. "Yeah," he said, "and we're just getting started." The victory was a spark, but the fire was far from lit. Ethan woke to a town transformed yet stubbornly the same. The championship had made him a hero to some, but to others, he was still the kid who dared to love differently. The local diner buzzed with praise for his game-winning throw, but whispers of shame followed him through the streets. School was a mixed bag. The GSA rally had grown, with more students joining, their signs bolder, their voices louder. Sarah hugged Ethan, her eyes shining. "You're giving us hope," she said, but the hallways still held danger. A group of boys shoved Ethan into a locker, their laughter sharp. Ryan pulled him away, his jaw tight. "They're scared," he said. "You're changing things." Ethan's parents were a harder battle. His mom started attending PFLAG meetings, her tentative support a lifeline. But his dad's silence grew colder, his absence at the championship a wound that wouldn't heal. Ethan wrote him a letter, pouring out his heart. His love for football, for Ryan, for himself. He left it on the kitchen table, unsure if it would change anything. On the field, the team was a fragile unit. Jake and a few others stood by Ethan, their loyalty earned through his grit. But others grumbled, their prejudice simmering. Coach Thompson, now a reluctant ally, pushed for unity. "We're a team," he barked at practice. "Act like it." Ethan led by example, his throws sharper, his leadership fiercer. He and Ryan ran drills until their bodies ached, their connection a silent promise. One evening, Ethan found his dad reading his letter. The man's eyes were red, his voice hoarse. "I don't understand," he said, "but I'm trying." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "That's all I ask," he said, and for the first time in months, they hugged. The town's divide deepened. The pastor's sermons grew louder, calling Ethan's victory a false triumph. Flyers reappeared, uglier now, targeting Ethan and Ryan. But support grew too. A local business hung a rainbow flag, and the diner's owner banned anyone who spoke against Ethan. Small acts, but they added up like stones building a foundation. Ethan and Ryan dreamed of the future. They applied to colleges, targeting schools with strong football programs and vibrant queer communities. Late at night, they'd lie on Ryan's bed, scrolling through websites, imagining a life where they could kiss in public without fear. "We'll get there," Ryan promised, his fingers tracing Ethan's palm. The postseason brought new challenges. Ethan was invited to a regional all-star game, a chance to shine for college scouts. But the invitation came with whispers. Some coaches hesitated, wary of his reputation. Ethan didn't care. He trained harder, Ryan at his side, their bond a shield against doubt. The all-star game was a crucible. Ethan played like a man possessed, his passes slicing through defenses, his leadership undeniable. Ryan, selected as a receiver, caught every throw, their chemistry electric. The crowd, a mix of strangers from across the state, cheered without judgment. For one night, Ethan was just a quarterback, not a symbol. They won, and Ethan was named MVP. As he held the trophy, Ryan's grin lit up the field. Scouts approached, offering handshakes and business cards. One, from a progressive college in California, pulled Ethan aside. "We want you," he said, "and we don't care who you love." Ethan's heart soared, the future suddenly tangible. Back in Lincoln, the victory sparked change. The GSA grew, drawing allies from unexpected places. Teachers, parents, even Jake's brother, who apologized for his cruelty. Ethan's dad started attending games, his cheers tentative but real. The town wasn't healed, but it was shifting, one heart at a time. Ethan and Ryan kept fighting. They spoke at a school assembly, sharing their story with raw honesty. Some students walked out, but others stayed, their applause a quiet revolution. Ethan felt the weight of their courage, knowing he and Ryan were paving a path for others. One night, under the stadium lights, Ethan proposed a plan. "Let's start a scholarship," he said, his voice fierce. "For kids like us, who need a way out." Ryan's eyes lit up, and they spent hours brainstorming, their dreams bigger than the town that tried to break them. The season's end brought graduation. Ethan and Ryan stood together, caps and gowns flapping in the breeze, their hands clasped as they crossed the stage. The crowd was mixed. Some cheered, some sat silent. But Ethan didn't care. He had Ryan, his family, his truth. That summer, they worked on the scholarship, raising funds through community events. The diner hosted a fundraiser, and the GSA organized a pride walk, the first in Lincoln's history. Ethan's dad showed up, a rainbow pin on his jacket, and Ethan's heart swelled. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As they packed for college, Ethan and Ryan stood in Ethan's room, their lives tangled in boxes and memories. "We did it," Ryan said, his voice soft. Ethan pulled him close, their foreheads touching. "Yeah," he said, "and we're not done." College was a new world. Ethan and Ryan chose a university in California, its campus a haven of diversity and acceptance. The football team welcomed them, their coach unfazed by their relationship. For the first time, Ethan played without fear, his arm a cannon, his leadership natural. Ryan, a star receiver, ran routes with the same grace that had carried them through high school. But Lincoln's shadow lingered. Ethan got letters, some proud, others hateful. He kept them all, a reminder of why he fought. The scholarship they'd started gained traction, funded by donations from allies across Ohio. They named it the Caldwell Miller Fund, a beacon for queer kids in small towns, offering them a way out. Their first year was a whirlwind. Ethan majored in sports science, Ryan in journalism, their dreams taking shape. They lived in a dorm, their room a sanctuary of posters and laughter. They kissed openly on campus, held hands in coffee shops, and for the first time, Ethan felt free. But freedom came with guilt. He thought of Sarah, of the kids still trapped in Lincoln, and vowed to keep fighting. The scholarship's first recipient was a girl named Mia, a soccer player from a town like Lincoln. She wrote Ethan a letter, her words raw. "You showed me I could be myself." Ethan cried reading it, Ryan's arms around him. They invited Mia to campus, watching her shine in a scrimmage, her smile a mirror of their own. Back in Lincoln, change was slow but real. Ethan's dad called weekly, his voice warmer each time. His mom sent care packages, rainbow stickers tucked inside. Jake, now at a local college, emailed Ethan an apology, admitting he'd been wrong. The town's pastor retired, replaced by a younger voice who preached inclusion. The diner's rainbow flag stayed up, a quiet symbol of progress. Ethan and Ryan returned to Lincoln for the holidays, nervous but hopeful. The town felt different, still flawed, but softer. They visited the stadium, standing where they'd won the championship. "This is where it started," Ryan said, his hand in Ethan's. Ethan nodded, his heart full. "And it's not over." Their sophomore year brought new challenges. Ethan's team faced a brutal season, and injuries tested his resilience. Ryan struggled with a professor who dismissed his writing, but they leaned on each other, their bond unbreakable. Late nights in the library, coffee-fueled and laughing, became their refuge. The scholarship grew, helping more kids like Mia. Ethan and Ryan spoke at conferences, sharing their story to packed rooms. They faced hecklers, but their voices never wavered. "We're here," Ethan told one crowd. "And we're not hiding." Ryan squeezed his hand, his pride a quiet fire. One spring evening, under a California sunset, Ethan proposed. Not with a ring, but with a promise, kneeling on the beach where they'd spent countless weekends. "You're my home," he said, his voice thick. Ryan's eyes shimmered, and he pulled Ethan up, kissing him fiercely. "Yes," he whispered, the waves their witness. Years later, Ethan and Ryan stood on a field, not as players but as coaches. They'd started a youth program, teaching football to kids from all backgrounds, emphasizing courage over conformity. The Caldwell Miller Fund had grown, sending dozens of kids to college, each one a testament to their fight. Lincoln had changed. The GSA thrived, the diner a community hub, the stadium a place of pride for all. Ethan's parents visited, his dad's rainbow pin a permanent fixture. The town wasn't perfect, but it was healing one story at a time. At their wedding, held on that same field, Ethan and Ryan stood under an arch of flowers, their teammates, old and new, cheering. Sarah gave a speech, her voice strong, and Mia, now a college star, caught the bouquet. The crowd danced under the stars, the air alive with love and hope. As they aged, Ethan and Ryan never stopped fighting. They wrote a book, Last Second Miracle, telling their story to inspire others. It became a beacon for queer kids everywhere, a reminder that love and courage could change the world. They adopted a daughter, Lily, raising her with the same fire that had carried them through. On the anniversary of their championship, they returned to Lincoln, standing on the field where it all began. Lily ran between them, her laughter echoing. "You won it all," Ryan said, his hand in Ethan's. Ethan smiled, his heart full. "We won it all." Their legacy lived on, in the kids they helped, the town they changed, the love that never faltered. Ethan looked at Ryan, the boy who'd been his strength, his home, his miracle. Together, they'd faced a world that tried to break them and built one that couldn't. And in that moment, under the Ohio stars, they knew they'd won more than a game. They'd won a life.